So the day's finally arrived. The excitement has been mounting. You run out and you've just bought your first digital SLR. Get it home, take it out of the box, charge up the battery, run out and take a few photos. But when you get home and pull them up on the computer, there's a little feeling of disappointment on the inside. They're not exactly everything that you expected, not the magazine style quality that you had hoped for. So today, I want to teach you the tricks and the secrets that I've learned over the past 6 years as a professional photographer to get those pro quality magazine style pictures from your digital SLR right at home in just a few minutes. And it's as easy as pressing one button. Only one button to press, Dan? Really? Well guys, the reason I think or make photography sound or seem so easy is because I know that no matter how many buttons or settings or modes are on your particular camera, they're only controlling three major things, and those are ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. And once you fully understand these three aspects of photography and how they relate together and how they work whenever you're taking a particular picture together, then you are going to fully understand photography, and it really is going to be that easy.
El 18 de julio en el patio de un convento, el pueblo madrileño, juntar quinto regimiento, con Lister y campesino, con Garán y con Modesto, con el comandante Carlos. No hay miliciano con miedo. Tenga jaleo, jaleo, fuego ya ametralladora, sí, sí, Franco se va a paseo y Franco se va a paseo. Con los 4 batallones que Madrid van defendiendo, se va lo mejor de España, la flor más roja.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is which mode you should be shooting in, because I know you're probably wondering, how should I set my camera up? What mode should I shoot in? I should go to the little night mode for night photography, or I should go for P mode because I'm a professional. No, guys. And if you're shooting on the green square, auto mode, green box mode, whatever you want to call it, this video is for you. Because today we're going to learn how to shoot natural light, and we're going to fully understand aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And on top of that, I'm going to tell you about the mode that professional photographers shoot in at least 99% of the time. That may be a slight exaggeration. Maybe some professional photographers only use it 90 or 95% of the time, and some are hardcore holdouts, manual mode only. I'm going to teach you why that is a ridiculous concept, and manual mode does have its place, but that's only for extreme situations in extremely dark places, for instance, where you're using a flash. But today we're not going to worry about any of that, and I'm going to teach you how to get professional level pictures shooting the natural light style in what mode? Aperture priority mode. So you've got your digital SLR, and you've tried out quite a few modes. None seem to exactly fit perfectly. Don't you wish there was a mode you could leave your camera in that would fit every situation, no matter how bright, how dark? You could always use it, and it would give you the best images possible. And on top of that, it would also allow you to retain full creative control. Instead of a mode cutting off any of your creative tools, you could have full control over every aspect of the photo. This mode is known as Aperture Priority Mode, and whether you have a Canon or Nikon, either way, your camera already has Aperture Priority Mode built in. So if you need to grab your camera manual to figure out where Aperture Priority Mode is, then you can do that. But if you look on the dial on top, on a Nikon, there's going to be an A, and that stands for Aperture Priority Mode. So turn the dial to A. And for Canon, this is known as AV mode. Just turn the dial to AV, and AV stands for Aperture Priority. But turn the dial there, and that is the place to stay. This is where professional photographers take 99% of their photos. So check this out, and then figure out from there how to change your aperture, because that's what AV mode allows you to do. It allows you to lock in your aperture, and aperture is the key setting to control because it gives you two major benefits. It allows you to let in a lot of light to give you a higher shutter speed to keep your pictures from being blurry. And on top of that, that allows you to take pictures in darker situations and let in more ambient light for more beautiful, romantic, blurred backgrounds. So what I want to leave you with here today is a get quick started guide. This is just a simple set of rules to follow when you go out and shoot. It's going to help you better understand how your camera works and also teach you the mode that professional photographers use for over 95% of their shots. As I mentioned previously, this is Aperture Priority Mode. For Canon cameras, it's AV mode on the dial on the top, and for Nikon cameras, it's A. So just find the A setting on the dial for Nikon or Sony. For Canon, as I mentioned, it's AV mode. So turn the dial to AV mode, and then look on your camera. It's going to be different depending on what model you have. But if you have to look at the manual, that's fine, but just play around till you can figure out how to change the aperture. And those will be numbers such as 1.8, 2.0, 2.8, 3.5. This is the aperture of the lens. It's going to be the setting that determines if the background is going to be blurry, dreamy like you see in the movies, or if everything's going to be in focus. So a very high aperture number means that everything will be in focus, but a very low aperture number such as 1.2, 1.4, 2.0, 2.8, that will cause the background to blur a little more. And it also lets more light in the camera, which gives you more shutter speed and keeps you from getting these blurry pictures in dark situations. So this is something that you don't need to memorize now. It's nothing to harp on or be concerned about. The only thing you need to worry about is how to put your camera in aperture priority mode, and then figure out how to change the aperture priority settings, which is just going to be the aperture and your ISO. So ISO is the second thing that you're going to have to change when you put your camera in aperture priority mode. Obviously, we just discussed how to change the aperture to aperture priority mode. Of course, you have to change the aperture. But you also have to choose your ISO. You have to choose 2 settings. 2 out of 3 you get to pick. But these are easy ones because ISO stands for film speed. This is just like old school going into the pharmacy or store and buying film. ISO 100 for bright situations outside on the beach when the sun is at its brightest. Or if you're indoors and it's dark, ISO 800 or 1600 or sometimes even 3200 if it's an extremely dark situation and you're trying to pull in more ambient light. So don't kill yourself over this. The only thing you need to remember is this is just like buying film. Everyone had to do this. If you're going to be shooting outside, you need to put your camera on ISO 100 on a very bright day. If it's an overcast day, you could shoot at ISO 400. That's why there's a middle range, just for something like in the shade or overcast. But don't kill yourself over worrying about these things. Put your camera in AV mode, set your aperture, forget it, and then only think about, is it too bright? Is it too dark? What ISO do I need to shoot at? And what we recommend is to start at a low aperture setting. Set your lens to the lowest setting possible. So if you have a kit lens, a zoom, then you're only going to be able to set it to 3.5 or 4.0, something like that. 5.6 sometimes at the farthest end of the zoom range. So what I recommend is to buy the Nifty 50. It's a 50 millimeter prime lens. For Canon cameras, they're about $100 or $120. Nikon also has a Nifty 50, a 50 millimeter plastic 1.8 lens, and that's the aperture that you can set it at, 1.8. That's why I call it a 50 1.8. So make sure that you go out and buy this lens. It is going to change your photography. It's going to allow you to get those blurred, kind of dreamy backgrounds that you've been wondering how professional photographers do. That's not done in the computer. Sometimes it is, but that looks a little hokey. So what you want to do is to make sure that you buy the lens that allows you to bring in as much light to your camera and to blur out the background just like the professionals. And that starts at about $120 investment. Alright, so what I'm going to provide today is a get quick started guide. This is going to be your key to shoot like a pro as quickly as possible. So, as I mentioned in the last video, make sure that you purchase the 50 millimeter 1.8, Nikon or Canon, either way. Get that 50 prime today. So once you get the 50 1.8, put that on your camera and put it in AV mode. That's for Canon. Nikon users, put it in A mode. So if you have to resort to looking at your manual, then just look for aperture priority mode, and then from there look and see how to change your aperture. So what you want to do is put the prime on there and then drop your aperture down to f2.0. At f2.0, you're really going to start to see the differences. f2.0 lets in twice as much light as even f2.8, which if you have a zoom lens, it probably wouldn't even go that low. So you're going to get to experiment with blurring the background just like professionals do all the time. And you're also going to give yourself more shutter speed and be able to shoot in darker situations. So this Nifty 50 is really the key to learning photography, in my opinion. So now that you put your camera in aperture priority mode, you need to know that it is going to pick the shutter speed for you. The computer controls this, but you have to change 2 things. You lock in your aperture, as we just talked about, but then you also need to pick your ISO. Now ISO isn't anything too complicated. If you ever used a film camera or you remember any film cameras that your parents had, they had to purchase film. Just like going to the drugstore, picking out ISO 100 film for outdoor, bright, sunny locations, or ISO 1600 for indoor, dark, nighttime photography. And of course, there's everything in between. 400 for overcast days, or ISO 800 for maybe inside, but not a candle lit scene, just a little bit of ambient light. So you get to choose your ISO, and this isn't as complicated as you think. Don't kill yourself worrying about this. Just know that when you go outside and it's really bright, change your ISO to 100. And it's the one thing that's going to be difficult to remember, but as you practice shooting in AV mode, you'll remember whenever you go outside to change this. And it's just one of those things. You start walking around town and just looking around and saying, hey, what ISO would I use right now? I'd probably use ISO 400. It's a little overcast. Or indoors here in this cafe, maybe ISO 800. So just start practicing shooting and then watch your shutter speed here. The reason you need to change your ISO is because you want to keep your shutter speed up. Now, if it's a dark location and you try to put it on ISO 100, then your shutter speed is going to be too low and your pictures are going to come out blurry. You've seen it before. There seems to be a shutter lag and then the picture looks blurry. Well, that's because the ISO was too low and the shutter speed dropped accordingly. So no matter what settings that you use, this is all just a game and a dance with how much light you let into the camera. So the key is I'm going to teach you how to play this game. Whenever you go outside, ISO 100 for best quality. ISO 1600 indoors gives you a higher shutter speed, but you're going to get a little bit more grain introduced into the shot, a little bit more noise, they call it. So you want to shoot as low an ISO as possible for each and every situation. So what I recommend next is to go ahead and reset your camera to the factory default settings. If you do this, your camera is going to be set up just about perfectly, but just hit reset, and some people kind of get some funky settings put in there over the years. This just ensures that you're going to be ready to take professional quality pictures. And I just find the best way, no matter whose camera I pick up, I just hit reset factory default all the way. That way you're going to be sure that nothing is even a little bit messed up. And then turn the dial to AV mode for Canon or to A mode for Nikon users. And now, no matter what lens you have, turn the aperture to the lowest number possible. If you have the kit lens and it's a zoom, this might be 3.5, aperture 3.5, f3.5. But if you did purchase the 50mm 1.8, the nifty 50 that I was telling you about, the lens, then you're going to be ahead of the game. Honestly, this 50mm lens, f1.8 nifty 50, it's about $120. It is the key to learning photography, in my opinion. If you get this lens, you're going to be able to drop your aperture to a lot lower number than that 3.5 that a zoom lens can achieve, because even the most expensive professional zooms can only go down to f2.8. So if you buy the nifty 50, it will go down to f1.8. And so even at f2.0, you're letting in twice as much light as at f2.8 that a professional zoom could achieve. So for $120, you're really getting to see what Aperture is all about. So please purchase this lens, and I guarantee that it's going to be your go-to portrait lens. And on top of that, it's also going to allow you to take pictures in darker situations. Sometimes whenever you have your zoom lens on there, you see your pictures are coming out a little dark and you don't know what to do about it. This is like a little cheat. It allows you to take pictures in darker situations and also achieve that sexy, dreamy background blur effect that you see a lot of professional photographers using. So it's a catch-all. Everything that you want in a lens, it's there. It's going to teach you how to shoot natural light.
Okay, before we go out there and start shooting, there's one more thing that we have to go over. First, obviously, you need to make sure that the dial is turned to AV and that you are in aperture priority mode. You just did the factory reset, clear all settings. So now, look in your viewfinder and you're going to see a couple things. 202 equals how many pictures that I can take on this card. But that 3.5 number there that you see, That is the aperture. Now watch this. On this camera, you just simply scroll a wheel and the aperture goes up. This particular lens goes to f22. But if you scroll the other way, which is what we want to do, drop it down to 3.5. This is as low as this lens will go. Now, one confusing thing is some zooms, if you zoom it all the way out to 22 millimeters for here, look, the aperture jumps up to 4.5. So if you have a zoom lens, sometimes this number is going to vary. And if you just drop it down to 3.5 at the widest setting, then once you turn back, you're going to notice that it'll give you that lower aperture number again. So what you want to do is just pick the lowest aperture setting for that particular lens before you go out and take pictures. And then also you need to know how to change your ISO. So here you just press this button, ISO 100, and that's where you want to start. ISO 100 gives you the best quality, but you got to look at your shutter speed. So I'll give it a half shutter press, and look, I'm at a 1/6 of a second. That's way too slow. So ISO 100 is not going to work out here. Let's scroll this up to 400, 25th of a second. You can see that right here. 1/25th of a second really isn't enough actually for this type of scene. So let's go up to 1600, 100th of a second. That's beautiful. It's perfect. Okay, so now we can take pictures, and that's all you have to do. Just simply change your ISO to give you enough shutter speed. So the camera, or the computer inside more specifically, is going to pick the shutter speed for you, but you have to lock in your aperture, and you also have to control the ISO. So set and forget the aperture, just set it to the lowest number possible, and then just worry about controlling your ISO. If you're going outside, change it to ISO 100 first and see what happens, see if you get enough shutter speed. If you don't, just move the ISO up till you get the shutter speed that you want. It's really that simple. Okay guys, so there's not a lot to show you out here, not a lot of photos to take, but it's the start of fall, and I wanted to take some photos of these red leaves right here as they were just starting to change. And first thing I want to do is put the kit lens on here, the 18-55, and we're just going to use the formula and drop the aperture to the lowest number possible. And we're going to shoot both photos at around 50 millimeters. On this kit lens at 50 millimeters, the lowest aperture possible is 5.6. Start out at ISO 100. So starting out at ISO 100 and f5.6, and I can see right here on the top of my screen when I do a half shutter press, my shutter speed out here is only 1/10 of a second. So that's not fast enough. So that's half of a second at 50 millimeters, ISO 100 and f5.6. So you can tell our shutter speed isn't fast enough. So we're gonna bump our ISO up to 200, and here we still don't have enough shutter speed, 15th of a second. ISO 400, still not enough. ISO 800, and we have a 20th of a second, which still isn't enough. We're gonna go up to ISO 1600, and we're at a 40th of a second, still not enough. Let's go all the way to ISO 3200. Okay, it looks like we have enough shutter speed, about a 60th or an 80th of a second. It's barely fast enough, but we're gonna try it and give it a shot at 3200. At ISO 3200, we get 1/60th of a second at f5.6 aperture, and that's as low as we can go. So what we're gonna do is just pop on the nifty 50, and this is a 50 millimeter prime. It's an f1.8 minimum aperture that'll go down to. So we're gonna drop our aperture to f1.8, and we're gonna drop our ISO back down to 100. And at 100, we still only get about a 10th or 15th of a second. So we're just gonna go up to ISO 400. At ISO 400, we're already getting a 60th of a second, the same speed we were getting at ISO 3200 with the kit lens. So you can see how dropping your aperture gives you a lot more shutter speed. Let's take this shot at ISO 400. So We're gonna go ahead and raise the aperture to f2.0 because even though I recommend starting at the lowest aperture, if you raise your aperture just one little bit, then you're gonna get an extra bit of sharpness, because if you shoot at the minimum aperture of your lens, then your photos aren't gonna be quite as sharp as they could be if you stop down just a touch. Like this is an f1.8 lens, so we're gonna stop it down to f2.0. And at ISO 400, it looks like we still have enough shutter speed, so let's take a shot. Okay, still at a 60th of a second, so ISO 400 even at f2.0 still gives us enough shutter speed. So I think we got the photos that we want.